Picture this. You're sipping your morning coffee, minding your own business on property you've owned for 12 years, when some lady in designer yoga pants marches up your driveway with two lackeys and hands you a bill for nearly $4,000. That's exactly what happened when Karen Whitmore, oh yes, her name really was Karen, decided my off-grid cabin was ruining her precious HOA's property values. The kicker? My land has been here since 1987. Her HOA didn't even exist until 2019. Standing there in my gravel driveway, listening to her shrill voice echo off my metal garage door while the smell of fresh asphalt from their new road construction filled the air, I'm holding my original deed in one hand and her bogus paperwork in the other. The autumn wind rustled those crisp legal documents like they were mocking me. What would you do if someone tried to steal your property with fake paperwork? Drop your wildest HOA horror story below. And hey, where are you watching from? I bet half of you have similar stories about these power-hungry neighborhood dictators. My name's Jake Riverside, and this story starts with the worst 2 years of my life becoming the best ammunition I never knew I'd need. Back in 1987, I was a 25-year-old electrician who bought 2.3 acres of raw Colorado land for $47,000, every penny I had. Spent 15 years building my dream. A modest off-grid cabin with solar panels, a workshop full of renewable energy projects, and vegetable gardens that could feed half the county. My wife Sarah loved this place. We'd sit on the porch every evening, listening to the wind through the prairie grass, planning additions we'd never get to build. Cancer took her 2 years ago, and now it's just me and Voltage, my rescue dog named after my old trade, keeping her memory alive on the land she helped me build. The property sits on the original county road, surrounded by what used to be empty prairie. Then 5 years ago, some California developer decided our valley was perfect for luxury mountain living. Enter Meadowbrook Estates, 400 pristine homes, manicured lawns, artificial ponds, and residents paying up to $800,000 for the privilege of living next to my eyesore. Here's the kicker. County records show my land was specifically excluded from all development agreements. The original surveyor drove stakes with flags marked exempt around my boundaries. I've got photos, permits, and a paper trail dating back 35 years. Nobody bothered to tell Karen Whitmore. Karen moved here from Orange County 2 years ago, right around the time I was burying my wife. 47 years old, real estate agent turned HOA president, driving a spotless white BMW that's allergic to dirt roads. She's got 3 kids in private school, a husband who owns dental practices, and the particular brand of entitlement that comes from never hearing the word no. This woman measures neighbors' grass with rulers. She once filed a formal complaint because someone's garbage can was visible 47 minutes past pickup time. The smell of her aggressive floral perfume could knock a buzzard off a garbage truck. Our first encounter seemed innocent enough. Sweet smile, friendly wave. Hi there, I'm Karen from the Homeowners Association, just doing a neighborhood survey about property improvements. 3 days later, she returned with the Covenant Compliance Committee, 2 nervous guys in polo shirts who looked like hostages. Karen's heels clicked across my gravel driveway like a machine gun firing warning shots. These solar panels are diminishing adjacent property values by $50,000 per unit, she announced, waving a thick binder of regulations. You have 30 days to comply with architectural standards or face daily fines of $100. I pulled out my 1987 deed showing explicit exemption from future HOAs. She barely glanced at it through those oversized sunglasses. Legal loopholes won't protect you forever. This is about community standards and property values. Community standards, from the woman who moved into a development built around my existing property. Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice level the way Sarah taught me during her treatments, this land predates your HOA by 32 years. I'm not part of your association. Her smile turned arctic. We'll see about that. As she strutted back to her BMW, the crunch of gravel under her designer heels sounded different, more deliberate, more threatening, like a countdown timer had just started ticking. The next morning proved my instincts right. I woke to voices and measuring tapes. 3 HOA contractors were photographing my fence line, documenting what Karen later called property boundary discrepancies. "What are you doing on my land?" I asked. They shrugged. Karen sent us to document violations. Violations. On property that predates their entire neighborhood. That's when I realized this wasn't about grass height or garbage cans. This was about power, control, and a California transplant who'd never met a problem she couldn't litigate into submission. Karen Whitmore had picked the wrong widower to mess with. Sarah always said I was too stubborn for my own good. Time to prove her right. 2 weeks after the measuring tape incident, my mailbox became Karen's personal declaration of war. First came the county complaint claiming my property violated new residential zoning requirements, which was hilarious since agricultural zoning doesn't vanish because someone builds McMansions nearby. Then arrived the official HOA letter on expensive letterhead demanding $500 monthly in dues, retroactive to 2019. $2,000 for an HOA I never joined. Karen wasn't finished flexing her newfound authority. She organized a neighborhood petition about safety concerns regarding my workshop. Apparently, my 40 years of electrical experience made me a public menace. The petition claimed my solar batteries could explode without warning, and my tools created excessive noise pollution. The woman had clearly never heard a real construction site at 7 a.m. The final insult came via Facebook. Karen posted in Meadowbrook Estates community about our non-compliant resident endangering property values. She'd photographed my property from her BMW, somehow making my organized workshop look like a tornado hit it. 63 neighbors I'd never met demanded something be done about the eyesore. The smell of betrayal mixed with my morning coffee as I scrolled through those comments. Time for some old-fashioned electrical troubleshooting. When circuits fail, you trace the problem back to its source. I spent the next week buried in county records, learning more about property law than any retired electrician should know. That's when I discovered Karen's dirty little secret. Her real estate license showed 2 prior violations for misrepresenting property boundaries to clients. My late wife Sarah always said patterns reveal character, and Karen's pattern was crystal clear. Even better, I remembered something from my union days about liability insurance. A quick record search confirmed my hunch. The HOA's policy specifically excluded coverage for disputes with pre-existing non-member properties. Some lawyer was smarter than Karen realized, but the real jackpot came through a Freedom of Information Act request. Karen's husband's dental practice owed $127,000 in back taxes. No wonder she was desperate to shake down everyone else for money. Here's where Karen made her first critical error. She'd picked a fight with someone who'd spent decades solving problems nobody else could fix. I installed professional security cameras around my property after noticing fresh footprints near my fence. Night vision, cloud backup, motion alerts, the works. Those cameras caught Karen's next move faster than I expected. 3 days later, her safety patrol was trespassing on my land, photographing my workshop windows and testing gate latches. The irony was perfect. The woman claiming I was dangerous was literally committing crimes on my property. But that trespassing footage led to my favorite discovery yet. While researching criminal law for my police report, I stumbled across something that made me grin like a fool. Karen's own incorporation documents contained a fatal flaw. They'd never properly included my specific parcel in their legal descriptions. Some copy-paste lawyer had used boilerplate language without checking actual survey maps. In legal terms, Karen had exactly 0 authority over my land. Less authority than Voltage, actually. The local newspaper made everything public after I sent them Karen's Facebook screenshots alongside my 1987 deed. Rural resident fights HOA overreach hit the front page of Mountain Valley Tribune, and suddenly, my quiet dispute became community entertainment. Karen's response was pure gold. She called the editor demanding a retraction, threatening to pull her real estate advertising unless they corrected the record. The editor published her complaint in the letters section, right next to 3 supportive letters from neighbors fed up with HOA tyranny. You could practically hear the power shifting, but the sweetest victory came naturally. Mrs. Henderson from 3 streets over appeared at my door with chocolate chip cookies and questions about solar installation. The warm smell of fresh baking mixed with autumn air as she explained how Karen had harassed her family about their vegetable garden, claiming it violated aesthetic standards. "I've been watching this whole mess," she said, "and frankly, we're all tired of being bullied." 3 more neighbors contacted me that week with similar stories. Karen's reign of terror stretched far beyond my property lines. She'd systematically targeted anyone who didn't conform to her suburban fantasy. The veteran with the pickup truck, the teacher with the wildflower garden, the retiree who dared paint his fence brown instead of white. The sound of gravel crunching under friendly visitors' feet became my new favorite music. For the first time since Sarah died, My property felt like a community gathering place instead of a fortress under siege. Karen had tried to isolate me, turn me into the neighborhood pariah everyone avoided. Instead, she'd accidentally created the exact opposite, a rallying point for everyone tired of her petty dictatorship. Standing on my porch that evening, watching voltage chase fireflies while neighbors chatted about solar panels and vegetable gardens, I realized something important. Sarah had always believed good people find each other when times get tough. Karen's first major miscalculation was assuming I'd fight this battle alone. She was about to learn how wrong suburban bullies can be. Karen's response to my newspaper victory was swift and vicious. If she couldn't intimidate me with fake authority, she'd try to crush me with real lawyers. 3 days after the Mountain Valley Tribune story, a process server appeared at my door with a civil lawsuit. Karen had hired Pemberton and Associates, a law firm specializing in property compliance enforcement, which sounded about as friendly as it was. The lawsuit claimed my property created a nuisance and health hazard that was irreparably damaging neighboring property values. 27 pages of legal gibberish demanding I remove my solar panels, tear down my workshop, and pay $35,000 in damages to surrounding homeowners. The smell of expensive legal paper mixed with my morning coffee as I read through Karen's fantasy version of reality. According to her lawyer, my 40-year-old property had somehow become a public menace overnight. But Karen wasn't done escalating. She organized what she called a safety patrol. Basically her and 3 bored housewives with clipboards documenting my violations. They'd drive by twice daily, photographing everything from my mailbox to my solar array, building what Karen called a comprehensive evidence file. The final straw came when she tried to weaponize the county building department. Karen filed a complaint claiming my workshop was an unpermitted structure that violated current safety codes. Never mind that I'd built it legally in 1992 with all proper permits. Karen figured modern bureaucracy could retroactively destroy what harassment couldn't touch. That's when I called in reinforcements. My union buddy Mike knew a retired municipal lawyer named Frank Lucas, who'd spent 30 years fighting exactly these kinds of battles. Frank took one look at my case and started chuckling, never a good sign for the opposition. "Jake," he said, leaning back in his creaky office chair, "this is the sloppiest legal work I've seen in 20 years. They're making claims they can't possibly prove." Frank's first discovery made my day. Every building permit I'd ever pulled was not only valid, but grandfathered under state law. Modern HOAs can't retroactively apply new standards to existing structures, something Karen's expensive lawyers apparently forgot to mention. But Frank's real genius was offensive strategy. Instead of just defending, we filed a countersuit for harassment, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Karen wanted a legal war. She'd get one. The tide started turning when Frank uncovered Karen's fatal error. While researching the HOA's incorporation documents, he discovered something that made us both laugh out loud. The original developer had never properly transferred ownership of common areas to the HOA. Legally speaking, Karen's organization owned nothing but debt and letterhead. My security cameras provided the knockout punch. Frank subpoenaed the footage showing Karen's safety patrol repeatedly trespassing on my property. Turns out photographing someone's private workshop through windows without permission is both criminal trespassing and invasion of privacy. The local newspaper loved this development. HOA president caught trespassing in property dispute made front page again, complete with security camera screenshots of Karen peering through my workshop windows like some suburban spy. Community reaction split down the middle, but in my favor. The online neighborhood forum exploded with residents taking sides. Team Jake included everyone tired of Karen's measuring tape tyranny, while Team Karen consisted mainly of recent California transplants who'd never met a regulation they didn't love. County Supervisor Williams started receiving dozens of calls about HOA abuse of power. Williams, a fourth-generation Coloradan who remembered when our valley was all cattle ranches, had zero patience for imported drama. "I've known Jake Riverside for 20 years, Williams told the newspaper. "If Karen Whitmore thinks she can Californify our county with frivolous lawsuits, she's got another think coming." The pressure was getting to Karen. Her real estate clients started asking uncomfortable questions about her legal troubles. Nothing kills property sales faster than buyers discovering the local HOA president is embroiled in federal court battles with neighbors. 3 more residents contacted Frank about similar harassment from Karen's compliance committee. Turns out I wasn't her only target, just the most visible one. Karen had been systematically bullying anyone who didn't fit her vision of suburban perfection. But the sweetest victory came from an unexpected source. The original Meadowbrook Estates developer, Tom Morrison, called me personally after seeing the newspaper coverage. "Jake, I specifically excluded your property from all HOA agreements," Morrison explained, his voice carrying the weight of professional embarrassment. "I've got the original survey maps proving it." Karen either didn't read the development plans or chose to ignore them. Morrison faxed over documents that ended Karen's legal charade permanently. Survey maps, exclusion agreements, and correspondence with county planners all confirmed what I'd known from day one. My land was never subject to HOA authority. The sound of my fax machine printing Morrison's documents was like Christmas morning. 40 pages of ironclad proof that Karen had been bluffing with a busted hand from the beginning. Frank filed the new evidence with the court, along with a motion to dismiss all of Karen's claims and award attorney fees for frivolous litigation. Karen's expensive lawyers suddenly got very quiet very quickly. Round 2 to the stubborn electrician with the grandfathered property. Karen's desperation reached new heights when her lawyers started abandoning ship. Pemberton and Associates quietly withdrew from the case, citing irreconcilable differences with client expectations. Lawyers speak for, "Our client is completely insane." But losing her legal team only made Karen more dangerous. Like a cornered animal, she lashed out in every direction possible. Her next move was breathtakingly bold and completely illegal. Karen convinced the HOA board to levy an emergency assessment of $15,000 on my property for remediation of environmental hazards. The letter arrived on official HOA letterhead, complete with threats of liens and foreclosure proceedings. 15 grand for hazards that existed only in Karen's imagination. I was still laughing at the audacity when my phone rang. Detective Martinez from the county sheriff's office wanted to discuss a complaint filed against me for threatening behavior and verbal assault. According to Karen's police report, I'd cornered her in the grocery store parking lot and made menacing statements about property rights while displaying aggressive body language. The complaint included dramatic descriptions of feeling unsafe and intimidated by my unstable behavior. Complete fiction. I hadn't seen Karen anywhere except driving past my property in her BMW. Martinez reviewed my security footage and immediately cleared me of all charges. Better yet, he warned Karen that filing false police reports was a felony. The taste of vindication was sweeter than Sarah's homemade apple pie. But Karen wasn't finished with her scorched earth campaign. She organized a boycott of local businesses that supported me, claiming any company that advertised in the Mountain Valley Tribune was enabling property value destruction. The local hardware store owner, Bob Fletcher, called to warn me that Karen had demanded he stop selling me supplies or lose all HOA member business. Bob's response was perfect. "Lady, Jake Riverside's been my customer for 30 years. You've been here 2 minutes. Guess who I'm keeping?" Karen's most desperate gambit targeted my utilities. She filed complaints with the electric company and water authority claiming my off-grid setup violated safety regulations and demanded immediate disconnection for public safety. The irony was delicious. Karen wanted to shut off utilities I didn't even use. My solar panels and well water made her threats as empty as her legal authority. Meanwhile, my support network was growing stronger. 3 more neighbors contacted Frank about Karen's harassment campaigns. The retired judge living in adjacent Elkhorn County offered pro bono consultation after reading about the case. Even the county assessor confirmed publicly that HOAs have 0 taxation authority over non-member properties. The story caught fire on social media when someone shared my case on Reddit. The post went viral overnight. HOA overreach started trending locally, and suddenly I had property rights activists from across Colorado offering support. Karen's reputation was crumbling faster than her legal strategy. The Real Estate Commission opened an investigation into her license violations after 3 clients filed complaints about misrepresenting HOA authority during home sales. Her husband faced public embarrassment when the newspaper revealed his tax liens. Nothing says responsible community leader like owing the state 6 figures while shaking down neighbors for fake fees. The HOA board started questioning Karen's leadership during increasingly contentious meetings. Board member Patricia Hendricks resigned publicly, citing concerns about aggressive tactics and questionable legal expenses. 2 others followed within a week. Karen's response to this avalanche of criticism was pure gold. She called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss my continuing threat to community safety and property values. The agenda included proposals to hire private security and install surveillance cameras to monitor the non-compliant property. 47 residents showed up, the largest HOA meeting in Meadowbrook history. I watched from my porch as cars filled the community center parking lot, the sound of slamming doors echoing across the valley like distant thunder. Mrs. Henderson stopped by afterward with meeting details and fresh-baked cookies. "Jake, it was a disaster," she said, the smell of oatmeal raisin mixing with evening air. Karen stood up there ranting about property rights terrorists and legal conspiracies. Half the room walked out. The neighborhood Facebook group administrator finally removed Karen for inflammatory posts and harassment of community members. Her farewell post was a masterpiece of entitled rage about ungrateful neighbors destroying community standards. But the sweetest development came from an unexpected source. An investigative journalist from Denver Channel 7 called requesting an interview about HOA abuse in rural Colorado. Apparently, my case was part of a larger pattern they'd been researching. Standing on my porch that evening, watching voltage chase fireflies while the last light faded behind the mountains, I reflected on how dramatically things had changed. 6 months ago, Karen seemed invincible. HOA president, real estate agent, suburban queen bee with unlimited authority. Now she was isolated, investigated, and rapidly running out of both allies and legal options. Sarah always said bullies eventually defeat themselves if you just give them enough rope. Karen was about to prove her right in spectacular fashion. The phone call that changed everything came at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning. Judge Hamilton Crenshaw, the retired jurist from Elkhorn County, had discovered something that made Karen's entire crusade not just wrong, but potentially criminal. "Jake, you need to sit down for this," Judge Crenshaw said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench. "I've been digging through federal land records, and your HOA problem is about to become a whole lot bigger." The retired judge had uncovered what Karen's expensive lawyers either missed or deliberately ignored. Meadowbrook Estates was built on land with unresolved Native American treaty claims dating back to 1878. The Arapaho Nation had never formally ceded mineral and water rights to the federal government, creating a legal cloud over the entire development. But here's the kicker. My property was specifically excluded from the original development precisely because the surveyor knew about these treaty complications. Some long-dead lawyer had been smart enough to keep my parcel out of any potential federal litigation. Karen's law firm had been billing the HOA $45,000 for legal research they knew was pointless from day one. You can't enforce HOA authority over land that might not legally belong to the HOA in the first place. Judge Crenshaw's next revelation made my blood boil. The HOA's financial records, which Frank had subpoenaed, revealed a pattern of systematic fraud that would make a mob accountant blush. $230,000 in legal and consulting fees over 3 years, money that should have gone to community maintenance and improvements. Karen's real estate company had mysteriously received $85,000 in property management commissions, despite never managing any HOA properties. The mandatory assessments Karen had been collecting weren't funding community improvements. They were paying her personal legal bills and financing her husband's dental practice expansion. Several HOA board members had invested in Dr. Whitmore's practice just months before approving those mysterious consulting contracts. Federal law requires HOAs to disclose all conflicts of interest in financial dealings, something Karen had conveniently forgotten to mention. But the smoking gun was hidden in the original incorporation documents. 3 signatures belonged to residents who'd moved away before the HOA was even formed. Karen had forged legal documents to create her little kingdom of suburban tyranny. The state attorney general's office had been quietly investigating similar HOA fraud schemes across Colorado. My case wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of corruption that stretched from California to Connecticut. Judge Crenshaw's investigation revealed Karen's true motivation. Her real estate business was hemorrhaging money due to lawsuits from previous clients who'd discovered her boundary misrepresentations. The HOA presidency wasn't about community service. It was about generating legal fees and assessments to cover her mounting debts. Karen's law firm withdrew the next day, citing newly discovered ethical conflicts. Translation: they'd finally realized they were complicit in fraud and didn't want to face federal charges alongside their client. The HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting to discuss Karen's removal after Frank delivered copies of the forged documents and financial irregularities. Board members who'd rubber-stamped Karen's schemes suddenly developed selective amnesia about their involvement. Local media began treating the story as an exposé of suburban corruption rather than a simple neighbor dispute. The Denver Channel 7 investigation expanded to include federal treaty violations and civil rights abuse, charges that carried serious prison time. My property value actually increased due to media attention about my off-grid paradise legally protected from HOA interference. 3 real estate agents called asking if I'd consider selling to clients specifically seeking HOA-free living. The irony was perfect. Karen's campaign to destroy my property value had made me the most desirable neighbor in the valley. Standing in my workshop that evening, the smell of sawdust and machine oil mixing with mountain air, I realized the game had fundamentally changed. This wasn't about neighbor disputes or property values anymore. This was about justice. The morning after Judge Crenshaw's bombshell revelation, my quiet workshop transformed into mission control for the most satisfying legal campaign of my life. My dream team assembled like something out of a heist movie, except instead of stealing diamonds, we were stealing back justice from a suburban tyrant. Judge Crenshaw brought 30 years of constitutional law expertise and a Rolodex that could topple governments. Rebecca Torres, the investigative journalist from Channel 7, arrived with boxes of public records and a nose for corruption that could smell fraud from 3 counties away. The surprise addition was Marcus Littlefeather, a tribal legal advocate who'd driven down from the Arapaho Nation offices after hearing about the treaty violations. These land claims have been dormant for decades, he explained, spreading century-old maps across my kitchen table. Your HOA just woke up a very expensive legal nightmare. My electrician buddy Mike volunteered to upgrade my security system with military-grade surveillance equipment borrowed from his nephew's private security company. Karen wants to play spy games, Mike grinned, installing hidden cameras with facial recognition software. Let's see how she likes being watched. Our legal strategy had 3 prongs, each designed to destroy a different pillar of Karen's operation. Frank would file motions to dismiss all HOA claims based on lack of jurisdiction, then countersue for malicious prosecution, defamation, and criminal harassment. Judge Crenshaw would prepare federal civil rights violations for Karen's pattern of discrimination against non-conforming residents. Meanwhile, Marcus would file tribal sovereignty claims that could invalidate the entire development's legal foundation. If we can prove treaty violations in the original land transfer, he explained, every property deed in Meadowbrook becomes legally questionable. Rebecca's financial investigation revealed fraud schemes that would make Bernie Madoff jealous. Karen had diverted $127,000 in HOA reserves through a network of shell companies, fake vendor invoices, and unauthorized loans to her failing real estate business. The assessment money residents thought was funding community improvements had actually financed Karen's family vacation to Hawaii, her daughter's private school tuition, and legal fees for her husband's tax problems. Federal embezzlement charges carried 20-year prison sentences. My favorite discovery was Karen's consulting contracts with companies that existed only on paper. Meadowbrook Landscaping Services had received $43,000 for work never performed, but shared the same address as Karen's real estate office. Coincidence? The FBI doesn't believe in coincidences. We organized our evidence like a military operation. Timeline documentation showing 3 years of escalating harassment and legal overreach. Financial forensics proving systematic theft from community funds. Video evidence of criminal trespassing and attempted property damage. I set up secure communications using encrypted messaging apps Mike's nephew recommended. Judge Crenshaw insisted on operational security after discovering Karen had hired private investigators to dig up dirt on my personal life. She's desperate enough to try anything, he warned. The community organizing aspect was pure poetry. Rebecca helped me create the Property Rights Defense Fund crowdfunding campaign that raised $75,000 in its first week. Supporters from across the country donated specifically to fight HOA tyranny and suburban corruption. Weekly coffee meetings at Murphy's Diner became strategy sessions for affected neighbors. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee mixed with the sound of people finally fighting back against years of petty oppression. Mrs. Henderson organized carpools to county supervisor meetings where residents demanded investigations into HOA oversight. My HOA Accountability Toolkit became an overnight sensation when Rebecca featured it in her news series. 3 simple steps any homeowner could follow. Request detailed financial audits, demand proof of legal authority, and document all harassment for law enforcement. The websites I'd researched for checking HOA complaint histories crashed from traffic after tens of thousands of people discovered they could investigate their own associations. State Attorney General databases across the country reported record searches for HOA fraud cases. Mike's security upgrades turned my property into Fort Knox with solar panels. Professional-grade cameras with cloud backup, motion sensors that could detect approaching vehicles from half a mile away, and encrypted recording systems that automatically forwarded evidence to Frank's office. The technical preparation was methodical and thorough. Every HOA violation documented with timestamps and GPS coordinates. Financial irregularities organized into prosecution-ready evidence packets. Federal treaty research compiled into legal briefs that could withstand Supreme Court scrutiny. We prepared presentation materials showing Karen's corruption for the Attorney General's office. Flowcharts mapping money from HOA accounts to Karen's personal expenses. Photo evidence of forged signatures and falsified incorporation documents. Judge Crenshaw's favorite moment came when we discovered Karen's pattern of targeting military veterans, elderly residents, and anyone who didn't fit her suburban aesthetic. That's not just fraud, he smiled grimly. That's civil rights violation under federal hate crime statutes. Standing in my workshop that final evening before the counterattack began, surrounded by evidence of Karen's crimes and tools for my vindication, I felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever. She'd always believed in fighting for what's right, no matter how powerful the opposition seemed. Tomorrow, Karen would discover that stealing from your neighbors and forging legal documents carries consequences she never imagined. The hunter was about to become the hunted. Karen's world was collapsing, and desperate people do desperate things. Her first move after the HOA board meeting was hiring a private investigator to dig up dirt on my personal life, as if being a grieving widower who minded his own business was somehow scandalous. The PI she hired was about as professional as her legal strategy. My upgraded security system caught him trespassing 3 times in 2 days, photographing through my workshop windows and rifling through my mailbox. Mike's military-grade cameras captured crystal-clear footage of license plates, facial recognition, and criminal activity that would make any prosecutor smile. "Ma'am, that's federal mail theft," Detective Martinez explained when Karen tried to spin the story as legitimate property investigation. Her PI now faced felony charges, and Karen faced accessory charges for hiring him. But Karen's desperation peaked when she attempted to bribe County Inspector Rodriguez to condemn my solar installation. Rebecca's hidden camera caught the entire conversation, Karen offering $5,000 cash to find safety violations that require immediate removal of non-compliant energy systems. Rodriguez reported the attempted bribery to the district attorney's office within an hour. Karen had just added corruption of public officials to her growing list of federal charges. Her next scheme was pure theater. Karen organized what she called a concerned citizens protest outside my property, complete with professionally printed signs reading, "Protect our property values," and "Safe neighborhoods matter." The turnout was pathetic. 7 people, including Karen's family, holding signs and chanting slogans while my security cameras documented every face for future harassment prosecutions. The smell of desperation mixed with morning dew as neighbors drove by laughing at the spectacle. Mrs. Henderson organized a counter-protest that same afternoon. 43 supporters showed up with "Property Rights Matter" and "Stop HOA Tyranny" signs, turning Karen's demonstration into a public relations disaster. Local news covered both events, making Karen look like a fringe extremist leading a tiny cult of compliance fanatics. Karen's final gambit in this round was filing an ethics complaint against Frank with the State Bar Association, claiming he was pursuing frivolous litigation for personal financial gain. And the complaint included accusations of collusion with criminal elements and abuse of legal process for political purposes. The State Bar dismissed Karen's complaint within 48 hours as frivolous and retaliatory. They also opened an investigation into her pattern of filing false legal complaints, a violation that could result in criminal charges for abuse of court systems. Meanwhile, I maintained the high ground through strategic patience that Sarah had taught me during her cancer treatments. When doctors gave bad news, she'd say, "Jake, sometimes winning means not letting them make you become someone you're not." I documented every illegal act Karen committed while remaining completely above reproach. No angry confrontations, no social media rants, no vigilante justice, just methodical evidence collection and professional legal responses. The media attention was intensifying in ways that terrified Karen. National property rights organizations rallied behind my cause after Rebecca's investigation went viral. Cable news picked up the story as a perfect example of HOA tyranny destroying American freedom. Karen's disastrous TV interview with Channel 7 became internet legend within hours. Asked to explain the forged signatures, she claimed they were administrative corrections of obvious errors. When pressed about the missing HOA funds, she blamed accounting discrepancies and former board member incompetence. But her most memorable moment came when Rebecca asked about the attempted bribery. "That inspector misunderstood my offer to donate to county safety programs," Karen stammered, sweat visible on her forehead under studio lights. "I never offered personal payments for official actions." The footage of Karen lying on television while holding the exact bills she'd offered Rodriguez played on repeat across social media. Karen lies trended nationally for 3 days. My crowdfunding campaign exploded after the interview, reaching $150,000 from supporters across America. Donations poured in from military veterans, rural property owners, and anyone who'd ever fought HOA overreach. The financial pressure was crushing Karen's remaining support. Her real estate license suspension became permanent after the bribery charges. 3 more HOA board members resigned rather than face federal investigation. Insurance companies canceled all coverage for Meadowbrook Estates due to ongoing criminal activity by leadership. But the sweetest victory was watching Karen's allies abandon ship. Dr. Whitmore filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and financial fraud. He'd discovered Karen had forged his signature on several HOA contracts, making him an unwitting accomplice to federal crimes. The sound of moving trucks became common in Meadowbrook as residents fled before property values collapsed completely. Karen's campaign to protect home values had achieved the exact opposite. Her corruption investigation made the entire development radioactive to potential buyers. Standing on my porch that evening, watching voltage chase fireflies while police cars patrolled Meadowbrook for the 3rd time that week, I realized something profound. Karen's attacks had transformed me from an isolated widower into the center of a nationwide movement for property rights justice. Tomorrow would bring the final phase of her self-destruction. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Karen's final desperate gambit crossed lines even I didn't think she'd dare approach. When bribery and fraud charges failed to stop the investigation, she decided to attack my mental health. Her first attempt was having me committed for psychiatric evaluation, based on what she called increasingly erratic and dangerous behavior. Karen filed a petition with the county mental health authority claiming I'd been making paranoid statements about government conspiracies and stockpiling weapons in preparation for violent confrontation. The petition included sworn statements from 3 neighbors I'd never spoken to, describing my suspicious nighttime activities and aggressive confrontations with community members. Pure fiction, but presented with enough official paperwork to trigger an automatic 72-hour hold if the judge hadn't demanded evidence first. Dr. Patricia Kim, the court-appointed psychologist, spent 3 hours evaluating me and reviewing Karen's claims. "Mr. Riverside," she concluded, "you're not only mentally stable, you're remarkably resilient given the harassment you've endured. Ms. Whitmore's petition appears to be weaponizing mental health services for personal vendetta." Karen's second attack targeted my environmental compliance. She filed a false EPA complaint claiming my property was an environmental hazard due to improper solar battery storage and contaminated groundwater from illegal septic systems. The EPA inspector who arrived expected to find ecological disaster. Instead, he discovered the most environmentally sustainable property in the county. My solar system exceeded all safety standards, my septic was newer than most neighborhood systems, and my water tested cleaner than municipal supplies. "Sir," Inspector Williams said while testing my well water, "I wish every property owner was this responsible. Your setup should be the model for sustainable living." Karen's third scheme was the most audacious, attempting to seize my property through eminent domain. She convinced 3 remaining HOA board members to declare my land blighted and petition the county for emergency seizure powers to protect community health and safety. The petition lasted exactly 4 hours before County Attorney Sarah Martinez laughed it out of her office. "Ms. Whitmore," Martinez explained publicly, "HOAs don't have eminent domain authority, and Mr. Riverside's property is the opposite of blighted. It's a showcase of responsible land use." Karen's final Hail Mary was convincing Sheriff's Deputy Collins that I was a dangerous extremist with weapons stockpiles who posed a threat to community safety. She provided evidence of my anti-government rhetoric and militia connections based on my property rights advocacy. Sheriff Thompson reviewed Karen's claims personally and reached an obvious conclusion. Ma'am, Mr. Riverside is a respected community member fighting legitimate legal battles. Filing false reports about terrorism threats is a federal felony. That's when Karen's world truly imploded. The psychologist's report declared her displaying signs of paranoid behavior and possible delusional thinking regarding property boundaries and legal authority. The EPA inspector filed a complaint about false environmental reporting. The county attorney requested investigation into her abuse of legal processes. Frank assembled our final evidence package like a master prosecutor building a death penalty case. 847 pages of documented violations, crimes, and fraud spanning 3 years. Security footage compilation showing clear patterns of harassment and trespassing. Financial forensics revealing $312,000 in embezzled HOA funds. Marcus Littlefeather's tribal sovereignty research confirmed the nuclear option. Federal treaty violations that could invalidate every property deed in Meadowbrook Estates. If the original land transfer violated treaty rights, he explained, the entire development becomes legally questionable. Community support had solidified into an unstoppable force. Local businesses displayed "We Support Jake" banners. Church groups organized prayer vigils for justice and truth in our community. The Veterans Association honored me for defending constitutional property rights against domestic tyranny. Even the school district asked me to teach renewable energy workshops, turning my property into an educational resource instead of the eyesore Karen claimed it was. The HOA board voted unanimously to remove Karen and banned her from all future meetings. Her own neighbors, the people she'd claimed to protect, turned against her after discovering their assessment money had funded her personal legal battles. Bank of Colorado foreclosed on Karen's house due to unpaid legal bills and tax liens. The irony was exquisite. The woman who'd tried to steal my property lost her own home to financial fraud consequences. But the sweetest justice came from an unexpected source. Dr. Whitmore's divorce filing revealed Karen had forged his signature on multiple documents, making him an unwitting accomplice to federal crimes. His cooperation with prosecutors provided the final evidence needed for criminal conspiracy charges. Rebecca's news series won a regional journalism award for exposing suburban corruption and government abuse. The story became a template for property rights advocates nationwide, spawning legislation in 12 states to prevent HOA overreach. Standing in my workshop that final evening before court, surrounded by evidence of Karen's systematic criminality and tools for complete vindication, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Sarah's death. Absolute certainty that justice would prevail. Tomorrow, Judge Morrison would end Karen's reign of terror permanently. The sound of my printer working overtime to produce final evidence copies mixed with autumn wind through my solar array, the same equipment Karen had tried to destroy. She'd picked the wrong target for her last stand. The courthouse steps buzzed with anticipation like opening day of a major trial. Standing room only didn't begin to describe the scene. Reporters, property rights activists, neighbors, and curiosity seekers packed every available space in Judge Morrison's courtroom. The smell of old wood polish mixed with nervous energy and the metallic taste of justice about to be served. Karen arrived 40 minutes late with her fourth lawyer in 6 months, looking like she'd aged a decade since this began. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the stress fractures, the trembling hands, the hollow eyes, the desperate energy of someone watching their world crumble in real time. I sat calmly with my legal team, thick evidence binders organized on the table like ammunition for a righteous war. Judge Morrison, a 30-year veteran known for his no-nonsense approach to frivolous litigation, surveyed the packed courtroom with the expression of a man who'd seen every kind of legal stupidity imaginable. Karen's new lawyer, some kid fresh out of law school who'd obviously drawn the short straw, stood up with shaking hands to present her case. "Your Honor," he stammered, "my client seeks enforcement of legitimate HOA authority over non-compliant property that threatens community standards." He couldn't produce valid legal documents showing HOA jurisdiction over my land. When Judge Morrison demanded proof of authority, the kid shuffled through papers like he was playing 52-card pickup. The sound of rustling documents filled the silent courtroom while Karen's face grew redder by the second. "Counselor," Judge Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades dispensing justice, Do you have any evidence that Mr. Riverside's property was ever legally subject to HOA authority? Well, Your Honor, we believe, that is, it's our understanding. The property appears to be— That's a no, the judge concluded. Frank stood up like Moses preparing to part the Red Sea. His presentation was surgical, methodical, and absolutely devastating. Original 1987 property deed showing explicit exclusion from future HOAs. Survey maps proving my boundaries predated the development by 32 years. Security footage montage showing 3 years of systematic harassment and criminal trespassing. But the financial forensics testimony was the knockout punch. Rebecca's investigation had uncovered a paper trail of fraud that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. $312,000 in missing HOA funds, forged incorporation documents, fake vendor invoices for services never performed. Marcus Littlefeather's testimony about federal treaty violations added constitutional weight to the proceedings. Your Honor, this development sits on land with unresolved Native American claims dating to 1878. The HOA's attempts to exercise authority over excluded parcels violate both state property law and federal treaty obligations. Karen's mental breakdown began during Frank's presentation and accelerated throughout the testimony. She whispered frantically to her lawyer, gestured at documents, and made increasingly desperate facial expressions as each piece of evidence destroyed her position. Judge Morrison's patience finally snapped when Karen interrupted testimony to shout, "This is about property values. He's destroying our community with that environmental eyesore." "Ma'am," the judge said sharply, "you'll remain silent or be removed from my courtroom." When Frank presented evidence of the attempted bribery, forged signatures, and false police reports, Karen's composure evaporated completely. She stood up screaming about property rights terrorists and environmental extremists destroying neighborhood safety. The bailiff stepped forward, but Judge Morrison held up his hand. He wanted everyone to witness Karen's complete meltdown for the record. "Ms. Whitmore," he said with judicial authority that could silence a riot, "this is the most egregious example of HOA overreach I've witnessed in 30 years on this bench." The courtroom fell silent except for the scratching of reporters' pens capturing every word. Mr. Riverside's property was never legally subject to HOA authority. The incorporation documents contain forged signatures. The financial records show systematic embezzlement of community funds. The pattern of harassment rises to the level of criminal conspiracy. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished delivering justice. "I hereby rule that Meadowbrook Estates HOA lacks any legal standing to make claims against Mr. Riverside's property." Furthermore, due to the criminal activity uncovered during these proceedings, I'm ordering immediate dissolution of the HOA pending federal investigation. The courtroom erupted in cheers from my supporters while Karen screamed something about appeal rights and property destruction. The bailiff finally escorted her out as she continued ranting about environmental terrorists and communist property laws. Judge Morrison wasn't done. "I'm awarding Mr. Riverside $127,000 in legal fees and damages for malicious prosecution. The evidence of systematic fraud and harassment warrants referral to federal authorities for criminal prosecution." The gavel's bang echoed through the packed courtroom like thunder announcing the end of a storm. Karen's 3-year reign of suburban terror was officially over. Local news captured every moment for the evening broadcast. National media picked up the story within hours. Legal experts called it a landmark victory for property rights against HOA tyranny. Standing on the courthouse steps afterward, surrounded by supporters and reporters, I felt Sarah's presence stronger than ever. Justice had finally come home. 6 months after Judge Morrison's gavel ended Karen's reign of terror, I finally understood what Sarah meant when she said, "Jake, sometimes losing everything helps you find what really matters." Karen received 18 months in federal prison for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The sentencing judge noted that stealing from neighbors while abusing legal processes showed behavior fundamentally incompatible with civilized society. Ordered to pay $427,000 in restitution she couldn't afford, Karen lost her house, her family, and her freedom to the very legal system she'd tried to weaponize. The former Meadowbrook Estates transformed into something beautiful. Residents formed a voluntary neighborhood association focused on actual community building. No mandatory fees, no architectural review boards, no measuring tape brigades. Just neighbors helping neighbors the way Sarah always said communities should work. My property became the cover story for solar energy today. Off-Grid Paradise: How One Man's Property Rights Fight Became America's Model for Sustainable Living. The delicious irony? Karen's campaign to eliminate my eyesore had made it a nationally recognized example of environmental responsibility. The Rural Property Defense Fund Scholarship now helps families nationwide fight HOA tyranny. Judge Crenshaw chairs the selection committee, ensuring resources reach genuine victims rather than frivolous complainers. 12 families have won cases using strategies we developed during my battle. 3 states passed property owner protection acts inspired by my case. Colorado's version, officially Jake's Law, requires criminal penalties for filing false HOA claims and embezzling community funds. Property rights advocates call it the strongest anti-HOA abuse legislation in American history. My YouTube channel, Off-Grid Jake's Property Protection, reached 300,000 subscribers, proving millions of Americans hunger for practical advice about fighting neighborhood tyrants legally. Each video ends with the same message: document everything, know your rights, and never let bullies make you someone you're not. The partnership with Lincoln Elementary created the renewable energy learning center Sarah and I had dreamed about during her final months. Every Tuesday, 4th graders visit to learn about solar panels and sustainable living. Their laughter fills spaces where grief once echoed, and I swear I can feel Sarah smiling when they ask the same curious questions she used to pose. Last September's Property Rights Festival drew over 4,000 people to our valley for workshops on solar installation, legal rights, and community organizing. Local businesses reported record sales, proving that standing up to bullies benefits everyone. The festival raised enough money to fund 3 more defense scholarships and a legal clinic for rural property owners. Former HOA common areas became the Meadowbrook Community Garden and Wildlife Preserve. The artificial ponds Karen once policed now attract migrating waterfowl and provide hands-on learning for visiting school groups. Voluntary cooperation achieved more in 6 months than 3 years of mandatory compliance ever had. Karen's final fate reads like ancient mythology about hubris and justice: prison, divorce, foreclosure, and permanent banishment from the real estate industry. She works retail in another state under a different name, a cautionary tale about what happens when petty power corrupts absolutely. But the real victory was personal transformation. My isolated grief sanctuary became the heart of a community built on mutual respect rather than artificial authority. Mrs. Henderson still brings cookies during evening walks. Mike upgraded everyone's security systems for free. Rebecca visits regularly, working on her book about suburban corruption that 3 publishers are bidding for. The sounds now filling my property are everything Sarah envisioned: children learning, neighbors planting gardens, friends gathering around the fire pit she designed but never saw completed. The smell of coffee and community conversation has replaced the stench of legal battles and intimidation. Standing on my porch last evening, watching Original Valley Family's grandchildren play alongside kids from former HOA homes, I finally grasped Sarah's deepest wisdom. She'd known that fighting for what's right isn't just about winning. It's about becoming the person worthy of what you're fighting to protect. Voltage, now Instagram famous with 40,000 followers, helps demonstrate that rural values and environmental responsibility aren't obstacles to community. They're the foundation of real community. This weekend, a disabled veteran from Texas is visiting for advice about fighting HOA discrimination against his service dog. Next month, a Native American family needs help stopping an HOA from destroying their sacred ceremonial garden. The fight for property rights never ends, but neither does the community of people willing to stand up for what's right. Drop your wildest HOA nightmare in the comments. It might become next week's featured story on HOA Stories. Hit subscribe if you believe American property rights are worth defending, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest victories against neighborhood tyranny. Because Sarah was right. Good people find each other when times get tough.
From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks so much for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.